Award-winning Scottish historian William Dalrymple has authored a book on India's ancient trade route, the Golden Road. The book explains how India is the forgotten heart of the ancient world. The country was the seat of Buddhism and the knowledge center for mathematics, astronomy, technology and literature, attracting scholars from all over the world. Dalrymple tracks India's influence from 250 BC to 1200 AD along the Golden Road, stretching from the Red Sea to the Pacific. He argues that it was India and not China that was the greatest trading partner of the Roman Empire. The strength of the Buddhist teachings brought India and Chinese thought to their closest alignment in history. But today, China has leveraged history and weaponized the Golden Road. At the end, Dalrymple leaves his readers with a question: can India do it again? We sat down with William Dalrymple to get some answers.
Everyone says over the past few years that India's time has come. India's moment is now. We find ourselves in a very interesting position. We are between two adversaries, Pakistan and China. We are in the middle of geopolitical tensions. There are two wars going on. Everyone says that India can play a very big role in what's happening globally. We can be a mediator in Ukraine. We can be an important player in the Middle East, and we can grow in global value chains. Perhaps this book has some answers to where we can move on in future. So let me just kick this off with a paragraph. And this is actually the last page in William's book, and I'd like to begin with that. You wrote that India has always been at its most creative and influential best, where it has been most connected, plural, hybrid, open, and receptive to ideas from neighbors, when it represents cohabitation and not a clash of civilizations. Keeping this in mind, do you really feel that India's time has come? And why do you think we've not leveraged such a rich heritage which you've spoken about?
So different questions there. First of all, has India's time come? I think there's no futurologist or no economist who would dispute that by the end of this century, unless there's some dramatic change, and that's always possible, but it seems impossible to imagine that by the end of the century, any outcome other than India, America, and China being the three big economies of the world. Which of those three is the biggest is an open question. If I'd been putting my money on it 10 years ago, I'd have put my money on China probably, the speed at which the Chinese economy was growing, but it's faltered. And it's not growing. I was in Hong Kong over the summer, and there was a great deal of discussion about the emigration of capital from China, not just to India, to other places like Vietnam, but India was receiving a great deal. Singapore too was getting a lot of the business that was going to China. So I am a big optimist for the economic power of India already, but I can't see any realistic scenario where India is not one of the three biggest economies by the end of the decade. As for the second question, will India use its heritage and develop? What I think is very clear is that India was far more globalized than I think that many people realize in the early period. If you look at the Ajanta cave paintings, you see deliberately exotic depictions of Scythians, Greeks, Romans, Egyptians, various other nationalities shown with different skin colors, different clothes. The idea that India was a hermetically sealed, self-generating stage for genius is not supported by the evidence. India achieved what it did by taking ideas from elsewhere, mixing it with its own ideas, and taking them forward, which is what happens anywhere in the world. You don't advance miraculously with a light bulb going on. You take the current state of knowledge and you take it several stages further. So Aryabhatta and Brahmagupta are reading the works of Persians, Greeks, as well as Vedic mathematics. And it is, in my view, and others may see interpret it differently. But in my view, then as now, it's when you are most open, most humble, receptive, and open to other ideas, rather than sitting on your laurels, that you develop fastest. And if India can do that, there is no reason, in my view, that we can't see India taking a stronger role culturally as it has done already economically.
Right. William, you spoke a great deal about Buddhism. I think 3 or 4 chapters of your book are focused on that. And you spoke something very interesting. You said that Buddha was open to the idea of accumulation of wealth, which he recognized as a necessary evil until such time as nirvana could be achieved. And you also said that Buddhism was a practical religion. Gautam Buddha felt that you'll not be able to sustain being religious if you try and punish yourself too much. Not everyone can do that. You have to do something which is a middle path. And Buddhism had a great deal of impact on our trade routes. Would you agree that the Golden Road that you speak about was majorly influenced by Buddhist monks and traders who connected with the rest of the world?
So first of all, this is not a book about the history of India. It's a history of the diffusion of Indian ideas. And obviously, Buddhism is an idea which travels furthest, probably, of all Indian ideas. You see Buddhist monasteries in Siberia, in Mongolia, as well as, all the parts before that. And in contrast, for example, to Jainism, which doesn't seem to travel as much. And it's an interesting question why you see Buddhist monasteries everywhere and not Jain monasteries. But as far as the Buddha's view on merchants, it's very clear that the early patrons of Buddhism are the merchant class. And when you go to a site like Sanchi, the inscriptions there very clearly record what we today would call crowdfunding. And so, the ivory merchants of Vidisha sponsor one gate. The Yavana merchants, in other words, the Greek merchants of Karla, put up several pillars within the cave temple of Karla outside Pune.
William, do you believe that, the reason why I asked this is because nowadays the big debate is how does India become a developed country by 2047? Do you think we would be doing a disservice if we don't map out our history in this manner? From what I sensed during your presentation was that you felt that there has never been a thorough documentation of our ancient cultural, literary, academic, mathematic linkages with the world, and that's why it was important to document it in this manner.
So that's not true. There are amazing scholars at work in this country, in this city. In this city alone, we have Himanshu Prabharai, who's done more for the study of the Indian coastal trade, international trade, the sea routes, the extraordinary scholar. We have Tanzan Sen, who's done extraordinary work on India-China relations, and a lot of what I've been talking about, Wu Zetian, is from his extraordinary archival work. There are many, many scholars, but it isn't widely known. And you have, I think one of the things that is odd to me coming from where I come from in Britain is you have leading academics writing for a general audience, whether it's Stephen Greenblatt writing, the world's leading Shakespearean scholar, arguably, writing about the Swerve, which is a #1 bestseller for 6 months on the New York Times bestseller list, and also wins the Pulitzer Prize. We haven't yet had those sort of superstar academics here who have brought the history to a wider audience. And in the absence of that, we've had a growth of WhatsApp history. So atomic bombs in the Mahabharata, the rishis using internet, drones in the Ramayana, whatever, choose what you like. Cat plastic surgery, in the Vedic times. And so I think there is a huge need for the work of scholarship to be made more widely available. It's one of the jobs we try and do in the Jaipur Literature Festival, to bring the scholars on stage to large audiences and make their work known. But at the moment, you're not having Indian academia reaching out in the same way that they could do. And I think that has led to a triumph of WhatsApp history in many areas, with WhatsApp University becoming the most attended educational institution in this country.
Right. It is a menace, isn't it? Let me ask you about the great superpower rivalry and our own rivalry with China right now. There was a period in history where you've written that it was India, not China, that was the greatest trading partner of the Roman Empire. And we have very strong linkages with countries in Southeast Asia. Do you think China has been able to leverage the Golden Road, the Silk Road much more? They realized this importance thousands of years ago, and this is probably one of the reasons why we have this massive rivalry standoff with China going on.
So there's no question that Xi Jinping is a keen reader of history, and he has taken the idea of the Silk Road, which I think is an interesting idea in the 13th, 14th centuries, but absolutely inappropriate and historically a myth for the earlier period. And he's taken that and he's created the Belt and Road project based on that and weaponized it. And so far, there has been no Indian response to that. The MECC, which was discussed at the G20, may yet prove to be such a project, but I understand that's currently shelved because of the Gaza conflict and the Middle Eastern war. I think India could very much learn from China in the way that it has taken history and used it to its advantage. At this moment, India finds itself, I think, in a world where the vocational subjects are much more popular than history and the humanities. And I think the history and the humanities have an important role to play, and they haven't necessarily had the influence they could have.
All right. Thank you very much, William, for having this conversation with us. It's been an interesting evening and gives us a lot to think about. Thank you very much for speaking to CNBC-TV18.
Thank you so much for sponsoring this evening, sir.
Thank you so much.